Jake Morrison stood at the edge of what used to be the largest wheat field on New Eden. The golden stalks that once swayed in the morning breeze were now black and twisted. They crumbled to ash when the wind touched them. The smell of death hung heavy in the air. "How much time do we have?" Jake asked without turning around. He knew Dr. Sarah Bennett was behind him. He could hear her heavy breathing and the soft beeping of her scanner. 6 weeks, Sarah said. Her voice was quiet but steady. "Maybe 8 if we start strict rationing today." Jake closed his eyes. 6 weeks to feed 2 million people. The other colonies in their system were already gone dark. No more messages. No more supply requests. Just silence. "The children will be the first to go hungry," Sarah continued. "Then the elderly. The strong ones might last a few extra days." Jake turned to face her. Sarah looked tired. Her usually neat brown hair was messy. Her lab coat had dirt stains on it. She had been working for 3 days straight trying to understand the blight that killed their crops. "Tell me again what we know," Jake said. Sarah pulled out her tablet. The screen showed pictures of dead plants from different worlds. It started on Kepler 7 about 4 months ago. Then it spread to the farming colonies in the Beta system. Now it is here. She swiped to the next image. It kills everything. Wheat, corn, rice, even the native plants that the other species eat. Nothing survives. "What about the other races?" Jake asked. "The Valdari have those big farming worlds. Surely they have found something." Sarah shook her head. "I got a message from their science council yesterday. They lost everything too. Same with the Etherians. Their oldest colonies are reporting total crop failure." Jake felt a cold weight in his stomach. The Etherians had been farming for thousands of years. If they could not fight this thing, what chance did humans have? "There is something else," Sarah said. She looked nervous. "I ran tests on the blight samples. This is not natural, Jake. Someone made this." "Made it? You mean like a weapon?" "Exactly like a weapon. It targets specific proteins that exist in all food crops. The design is too perfect, too focused. Nature does not work this way." Jake walked back toward the colony buildings. The white domes looked small against the red sky of New Eden. Inside those domes, 2 million people were going about their daily lives. Most of them did not know yet how bad things were. "Have you heard anything from Earth Command?" Sarah asked as she followed him. "Nothing useful. They say they are working on it. But Earth has been dealing with their own problems for decades. I doubt they have answers for this." They reached the main administrative building. Inside, the hallways buzzed with activity. People carried reports and data tablets. Everyone looked worried but determined. Jake felt proud of his people. Even facing disaster, they kept working. Captain Tom Hayes was waiting in Jake's office. The tall man wore his blue uniform with perfect creases. His gray hair was cut short in military style. Tom commanded the 3 cargo ships that supplied New Eden. "I have news from the other systems," Tom said without greeting. His face was grim. "None of it is good." Tom activated the wall display. A map of known space appeared with red dots marking affected systems. There were a lot of red dots. The Valdari High Command issued a statement this morning. They are calling it the Great Silence. They believe this is the end of their civilization. Jake stared at the map. "What do you mean, the end?" "They are giving up, Jake. The Valdari Council has ordered all military ships to return to their homeworlds. They want to die with dignity on their own soil." Sarah made a small sound of disbelief. "They are just going to let it happen?" "It gets worse," Tom continued. "The Etherian Collective has sealed their great libraries. They are preserving their knowledge for whoever might come after them, but they have stopped all research into stopping the blight." Jake sat down hard in his chair. The Valdari were warriors. They had fought wars that lasted centuries. The Etherians were scholars who had solved problems that seemed impossible. If both of those great civilizations had given up, what did that say about humanity's chances? "Sir," Tom said quietly, "I received a formal request from the Etherian Council an hour ago. They are asking all human colonies to join them in what they call peaceful acceptance." "Peaceful acceptance of what?" "Of extinction." The room went silent. Outside the window, Jake could see people walking between the buildings. Children played in the small park near the residential dome. A few farmers were trying to salvage what they could from the outer fields. "They want us to stop wasting resources on research," Tom explained. "They say we should use our remaining time to prepare our souls for the journey beyond." Sarah laughed, but it was not a happy sound. "Prepare our souls? That is their plan?" Jake stood up and walked to the window. A little girl with blonde hair was chasing her dog around a tree. She was laughing. The sound came faintly through the glass. "What do our people know?" Jake asked. "The farmers know their crops are dead," Tom said. "The supply officers know we are running low on reserves. But most people think this is just a temporary problem. And the other human colonies? Fighting it the only way they know how. Every research station is working around the clock. Every colony is sharing data. No one has found an answer yet, but no one has stopped trying either." Jake turned back to face his friends. Sarah looked confused. Tom looked like he was waiting for orders. "The Valdari are warriors," Jake said slowly. "They understand honor and glory in death. The Etherians are philosophers. They see patterns and cycles in everything. To them, maybe this feels like natural order." He walked to his desk and picked up a photo of the colony's first harvest. Hundreds of people smiled in front of golden fields. "But we are human," Jake continued. "We do not go quiet into that dark night. We do not accept that this is just how things end." Sarah straightened up. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that while every other species in the galaxy is preparing to die with dignity, we are going to be stubborn. We are going to fight this thing until our last breath." Tom nodded slowly. "What do you need from me?" "Send a message to every human colony. Tell them New Eden is not giving up. Tell them we need every scientist, every engineer, every crazy idea they have. If this is a weapon, then someone built it. And if someone built it, then someone can break it." Jake looked out the window again. The little girl was still playing with her dog. "Send another message to the Etherian Council," he said. "Tell them thank you for the invitation, but humanity must respectfully decline. We have work to do." 3 months had passed since the blight first appeared on New Eden. The situation across the galaxy had grown worse in ways Jake I. Morrison never imagined possible. Dr. Mark Taylor rubbed his tired eyes as he stared at the data flowing across his screen at Luna Base. The human research station orbited Earth's moon. Far from the dying colonies, here 30 of humanity's best scientists worked day and night while the rest of the galaxy prepared to die. "Still nothing," said Dr. Lisa Chen, his research partner. She looked as exhausted as Mark felt. Dark circles ringed her eyes, and her lab coat had coffee stains from the past week. "There has to be something," Mark said. He pulled up the latest reports from the affected worlds. The Valdari samples show the same protein breakdown. The Etherian crops died the exact same way. But there has to be a pattern we are missing. Through the observation window, Mark could see Earth hanging in space like a blue and brown marble. The planet had been off limits for 300 years, ever since the Great Evacuation. Nobody went to Earth anymore. It was considered a dead world. "Dr. Taylor," came a voice from the communication station. "You have an incoming message from Colonel Parker." Mark activated the display. The face of Marine Colonel Lisa Parker appeared on screen. She was aboard her supply ship somewhere in the outer colonies. Her short red hair was pulled back in a tight ponytail, and her green eyes looked angry. "Mark, I just came from the Etherian homeworld," Lisa said. "You need to see what is happening out here." The image changed to show a massive city built into the side of a mountain. The Etherians had lived here for 10,000 years. Their crystal spires had always gleamed in the sunlight like jewels. Now the city was dark. "They sealed everything 3 days ago," Lisa continued. "Every library, every school, every research center. When I asked to speak with their science council, they told me the council had disbanded." Mark felt his stomach drop. Disbanded? But they were working on the blight problem just last week. Not anymore. The Etherian elder told me they have accepted their fate. They are spending their final weeks in meditation and prayer. They asked me to take their collected knowledge to whoever survives this crisis. Lisa's face appeared on screen again. "It gets worse, Mark. I stopped at 3 Valdari military stations on my way here. They are all empty. The entire Valdari fleet has returned to their home systems for what they call the final honor." Final honor? Ritual suicide. The whole species plans to die together in one massive ceremony. They believe it is more honorable than starving slowly. Mark stared at the screen in disbelief. The Valdari were the greatest warriors in known space. They had fought wars against impossible odds and won. If they were giving up, what chance did anyone have? "There is something else," Lisa said. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "I met with a group of human refugees from the outer colonies. They are starting to talk like the aliens. Some of them want to give up too." Mark slammed his fist on the desk. "No, absolutely not. We do not quit. I know that, and you know that. But people are scared, Mark. When they see entire civilizations just waiting to die, it makes them think maybe fighting is pointless." After the transmission ended, Mark walked through the Luna base corridors. The research station was small compared to the great cities on the colony worlds. Only 300 people lived here, but they were all working toward the same goal. In the genetics lab, Dr. Rachel Kim was studying blight samples under a powerful microscope. In the chemistry section, Dr. James Wilson was testing different compounds that might stop the infection. In the computer center, Dr. Susan Martinez was running complex models to predict how the blight spread. They were all human. Not a single alien scientist remained active in blight research. Every other species had given up. Dr. Taylor called Dr. Kim from her station. "I think I found something interesting." Mark hurried over to look at her screen. It showed the molecular structure of the blight organism magnified millions of times. "Look at this section here," Rachel said, pointing to a cluster of proteins. "This is not random mutation. This is engineered design. Someone built this thing like a machine." "We suspected that already," Mark said. "But can you tell us anything new? Maybe see how these proteins lock together? It is like a puzzle with a very specific key. If we could find that key, we might be able to unlock the whole system." Mark felt the first spark of real hope he had experienced in weeks. "What kind of key?" "I am not sure yet. But I think it might be genetic material from the original food crops, the ones that existed before space colonization." "You mean crops from Earth?" Rachel nodded. "The blight was designed to kill modern hybrid crops, but the original species might have natural defenses. The problem is getting samples." Mark looked out the window toward Earth again, the dead world that nobody was allowed to visit. The planet where humanity's original food crops had grown for thousands of years before the evacuation. 2 days later, Mark received another transmission from Colonel Parker. This time she was on a Valdari world called Thane Prime. "Mark, you have to see this," Lisa said. Her voice sounded different, sadder. The image showed a vast parade ground filled with Valdari warriors. There were thousands of them, all wearing ceremonial armor that gleamed gold in the sunlight. They stood in perfect rows, waiting. "This is the preparation for the final honor," Lisa explained. "Every Valdari warrior in this system is here. Tomorrow at noon they will all take poison together. They believe dying as one people is better than dying slowly from hunger." The camera moved to show the crowds of civilians watching from the edges of the parade ground. Valdari children who would never grow up. Valdari elders who had survived countless wars but would not survive this. "I spoke with War Chief Thane before the ceremony," Lisa continued. "I asked him why they were giving up when humans were still fighting." "Do you know what he said?" Mark waited. "He said humans are either the bravest species in the galaxy or the most foolish. He could not decide which. Then he asked me a question that I cannot stop thinking about." "What question?" "He asked me why humans choose slow death over quick acceptance. He wanted to know what we see that they do not." The transmission ended, leaving Mark alone with his thoughts. Outside the window, Earth continued its slow rotation. Somewhere on that forbidden world might be the key to saving every living thing in the galaxy. But getting there would be impossible. And even if they succeeded, would anyone still be alive to save? Mark returned to his lab. Around him, the other human scientists continued their work. They did not know that entire species were choosing death over hope. They just knew that someone had to keep trying. Maybe that was the answer to War Chief Thane's question. Humans did not choose slow death over quick acceptance. They chose the possibility of life over the certainty of death, even when the odds were impossible. Even when they were the only ones left trying. Even when hope itself had become heresy in a galaxy preparing to die. Dr. Mark Taylor had not slept in 36 hours. His hands shook as he held the data tablet that contained either salvation or confirmation of humanity's doom. Around him, the Luna base laboratory hummed with activity as his team worked through their most important discovery yet. "Show me the results one more time," Mark said to Dr. Rachel Kim. Rachel pulled up the genetic analysis on the main screen. "The blight has a weakness, right here." She pointed to a section of the organism's DNA structure. "It cannot process certain proteins that exist only in Earth's original crop species." Dr. James Wilson looked up from his chemical analysis station. "The problem is that those original species have been extinct for 300 years. When humanity evacuated Earth, we took hybrid seeds that could grow in different environments. The original plants died with the old world." Mark stared at the screen, so close to an answer yet so impossibly far away. "What about the seed vaults?" asked Dr. Susan Martinez from her computer terminal. Before the evacuation, Earth had storage facilities for genetic material. The global seed vault was in Norway, Rachel said. But Earth has been sealed for centuries. The radiation levels, the climate damage, the automated defense systems, nobody goes to Earth anymore. Mark walked to the observation window. Earth hung in space below them, blue oceans visible between brown continents. The planet that gave birth to humanity was now their forbidden graveyard. There might be a way, came a voice from the communication station. They turned to see Jake Morrison's face on the screen, transmitting from New Eden. I have been talking with our engineers about your discovery. Jake, Mark said, please tell me you have good news. Maybe, David Kim, our best engineer, thinks we can modify our cargo ships for a trip to Earth. It would be dangerous, but possible. A new face appeared beside Jake on the screen. David Kim was a thin man with black hair and tired eyes. He had been working on supply logistics since the crisis began. Dr. Taylor, David said, I ran the numbers. We would need to strip the radiation shielding from 6 ships to properly protect one vessel. The crew would have maybe a 10% chance of survival. 10%, Mark repeated quietly. That is if everything goes perfectly. If we can find the vault, if the genetic material is still viable, if we can get back to space before the radiation kills us. Mark felt the familiar weight of impossible choices. 10% chance of success, 90% chance of death. But without trying, the chance of survival for everyone was 0. There is more, Jake continued. Even if we get the genetic material, we need to distribute the cure to dozens of worlds simultaneously. The blight spreads too fast for a slow rollout. David nodded. We would need to convert our entire merchant fleet into a delivery system. Every cargo ship, every transport vessel, every supply runner, all of them flying one-way missions to infected worlds. One-way missions? Mark asked. The ships would not have enough fuel for return trips. We would be asking people to fly to distant worlds knowing they might never come home. Mark closed his eyes. They were asking volunteers to die for a 10% chance of saving everyone else. Have you told people what you are asking them to do? Mark asked. Jake's expression grew serious. I called a colony meeting yesterday. Told them exactly what we need. No lies, no false hope, just the truth. And we have more volunteers than we have ships. Mark felt something stir in his chest. Pride, maybe, or just amazement at human stubbornness. Dr. Taylor, came another voice from off-screen. Captain Tom Hayes stepped into view. I will lead the Earth mission myself. I know those orbital defense systems better than anyone. Tom, you could die down there. I could die up here too, just slower and hungrier. At least this way I go down fighting. 3 days later, Mark received an unexpected transmission. The source surprised him. It came from a Valdari military ship in the outer system. The face that appeared on screen was alien but familiar. War Chief Thane had deep blue skin and the distinctive bone ridges of his species. His armor bore the marks of countless battles. Human scientist, Thane said in accented but clear English. I've been watching your preparations. Mark was not sure how to respond. War Chief Thane, I thought your people had chosen the final honor. We had. My warriors are prepared to die with dignity tomorrow at dawn. Thane paused. But I have been thinking about what your Colonel Parker asked me. What did she ask? Why do humans choose slow death over quick acceptance? I have been watching your people prepare for this impossible mission to Earth. You know you will probably die. Mark nodded. Yes, we know. Then why? Why choose hope when despair is easier? Mark thought about all the volunteers who had signed up for one-way missions. About Tom Hayes preparing to fly into a radioactive wasteland. About Jake Morrison organizing the colony's final resources around a plan that would probably fail. Because someone needs to be stubborn enough to try, Mark said finally. If we are wrong, we die fighting. If we are right, everybody lives. Thane was quiet for a long moment. His alien features showed something that might have been respect. There is honor in your madness, human. My people have fought wars for centuries, but we have never fought death itself. Will you help us? Mark asked, hardly believing he was having this conversation. I will delay the final honor for 1 week. If your plan succeeds, my ships will help distribute your cure. If your plan fails, we will die knowing that someone tried the impossible. After the transmission ended, Mark sat alone in his laboratory. Outside the window, Earth waited. Somewhere on that poisoned world lay the genetic keys that might save every living thing in the galaxy. The odds were terrible. The plan was insane. The volunteers were probably going to die, but for the first time since the crisis began, Mark felt something he had almost forgotten. He felt hope. Tomorrow, they would find out if human stubbornness could overcome impossible odds. Tomorrow they would learn if refusing to surrender was wisdom or foolishness. Tomorrow they would try to steal life from the jaws of death itself. Captain Tom Hayes gripped the controls of the cargo ship Defiance as it broke through Earth's upper atmosphere. Around him, his crew of 12 volunteers worked at their stations with calm efficiency. They all knew this was probably a one-way trip. "Radiation levels are climbing fast," reported Navigator Kelly Brooks from her station. Her young face was pale but determined. "Hull shielding is holding, but we have maybe 6 hours before it becomes dangerous." Tom nodded. 6 hours to find the global seed vault, extract 300 years of preserved genetic material and get back to orbit, if they were lucky. Through the forward window, Tom saw Earth as no human had seen it for centuries. The blue oceans were now brown with pollution. The green continents were mostly gray wasteland. Massive storm systems raged across the surface, carrying radioactive dust from the old industrial zones. "My God," whispered Dr. Sarah Bennett from the science station. She had insisted on coming despite the dangers. "What did we do to our home?" "What we had to do to survive," Tom replied. "And what we are doing now to survive again." The ship shook as they flew through a radiation storm. Warning lights flashed red across the control panel. Tom fought to keep them on course toward the coordinates of the old seed vault in Norway. "Hull breach in cargo bay 2, called out engineer Mike Johnson. "Nothing critical yet, but the radiation is getting through." Tom made a decision that might doom them all. "Increase speed. We take the radiation hit now to get there faster." The landscape below them was alien and hostile. Where forests once grew, twisted metal structures reached toward the sky like dead fingers. Where cities once stood, empty ruins gathered radioactive dust. This was humanity's birthworld, and it looked like the surface of hell. "There," Sarah pointed at her scanner. "The vault should be in that valley." "But Tom, the automated defense grid is still active." Tom saw them on his screen. 3 defense satellites that had been guarding Earth's surface for 3 centuries. They were designed to keep people away from the poisoned world. "Can we fight them?" asked Gunner Lisa Park. "Not and have enough power left to get home," Tom said. "We go in fast and low. Maybe we can get past them before they lock on." The Defiance dove toward the surface like a falling star. Behind them, the defense satellites came to life, their weapon systems tracking the unexpected intruder. The first energy beam missed them by 50 meters, scorching the dead ground below. The second beam clipped their port engine, sending sparks through the cabin. "Engine 2 is down," Mike reported. "We are losing altitude fast." Tom saw the entrance to the seed vault ahead, built into the side of a mountain. It was their only hope now. "Hold on. We are going in hard." The ship crashed into the valley floor with bone-jarring force. Tom tasted blood where he had bitten his tongue. Around him, his crew picked themselves up from their stations. "Everyone alive?" Tom called out. "Alive and angry," replied Kelly. "Good. Sarah, how long do we need in the vault?" "At least 2 hours to identify and extract the right genetic samples." "Maybe 3. Tom looked at his radiation monitor. They had been on the surface for 20 minutes. The readings were already in the yellow zone. "Mike, can you fix the engine?" "Maybe. Give me an hour." They gathered their equipment and headed for the vault entrance. The massive door was sealed with electronic locks that had not been opened since the evacuation. Sarah connected her scanner to the access panel. "The power systems are still running," she said with surprise. "Emergency fusion cells. Built to last 1,000 years." The door opened with a grinding sound that echoed through the dead valley. Inside, artificial lights flickered on automatically. The vault stretched deep into the mountain, filled with storage units that contained the genetic heritage of Earth's plants. "Incredible," Sarah whispered as they walked through rows of preservation chambers. Every food crop that ever grew on Earth. Seeds, DNA samples, even complete genetic maps. They worked quickly but carefully. Sarah and her team identified the original crop species that might resist the blight. Wheat varieties that had grown in ancient Egypt. Rice strains from prehistoric Asia. Corn species that predated human civilization. Outside, Mike and his team worked frantically to repair the damaged engine. The defense satellites had stopped shooting when the ship crashed, apparently satisfied that the intruders were no longer a threat. "Sarah," Tom called over the radio. "We have company." On his scanner, Tom could see ships approaching from orbit. "Lots of ships. For a moment he feared they were Earth Defense Forces coming to arrest them for violating the quarantine. Then he heard a familiar voice on the radio. Human ship Defiance. This is War Chief Thane of the Valdari fleet. We are here to assist. Tom could hardly believe it. Thane? I thought your people were preparing for the final honor. We were. But your stubborn refusal to die has made us reconsider. If humans are mad enough to land on their poisoned homeworld, perhaps madness is what survival requires. More voices came over the radio. Etherian science ships, Valdari warships, even species Tom had never heard of before. This is Elder Corin of the Etherian Collective, came another transmission. We have reopened our research facilities. If you humans insist on fighting the impossible, then we will fight beside you. Tom felt tears in his eyes. The galaxy that had given up hope was coming together because humans refused to surrender. All ships, this is Captain Hayes. Tom broadcast. We have the genetic material, but our ship is damaged. We need help getting home. Already on our way down, replied a Valdari pilot. My transport can carry your crew and cargo to safety. 3 hours later, Tom and his team were aboard the Valdari rescue ship, climbing toward orbit. Below them, Earth fell away into the darkness of space. In Sarah's hands, she held data crystals containing the genetic codes of humanity's ancestral crops. Did we get everything we need? Tom asked. Sarah nodded. More than we hoped. These original species have natural defenses that the blight cannot overcome. If we can synthesize them properly, we can create a cure. Tom finished. Around them, the rescue fleet formed up for the journey back to the colonies. Valdari warships flew beside Etherian science vessels. Species that had been preparing for extinction were now working together for survival. Tom, came Jake Morrison's voice from New Eden. The galaxy is watching. Everyone wants to know if you found hope down there. Tom looked at the data crystals in Sarah's hands. Then he looked at the mixed fleet of alien ships that had come to rescue them. Finally, he looked at Earth shrinking behind them. Jake, Tom said into the radio, tell the galaxy that hope is not dead. Tell them that when humans go looking for life, we do not come back empty-handed. The fleet jumped to hyperspace carrying humanity's stolen fire toward the dying colonies. Behind them, Earth continued its lonely orbit around the sun. The graveyard world had given up its secrets. Now they would see if those secrets could bring the dead back to life. Dr. Mark Taylor worked without sleep for 4 days straight, turning the genetic material from Earth into a working cure. Around him at Luna Base, scientists from a dozen species worked together for the first time in galactic history. The synthesis is complete, announced Dr. Rachel Kim from her laboratory station. We have converted the original Earth genetics into a treatment that should stop the blight. Mark looked at the vials of pale blue liquid lined up on the lab table. Each one contained enough cure for an entire farming colony. There were 50 vials total, enough to save the galaxy if they could distribute them in time. How long before the treatment works? Asked Elder Corin of the Etherians. The tall, graceful alien had arrived at Luna Base with a team of his best scientists. His silver robes rustled as he moved between the human equipment. The computer model showed 2 to 3 weeks. Dr. Susan Martinez replied from her analysis station. The cure needs time to spread through the soil and repair the damaged crop genetics. War Chief Thane stepped forward from where he had been observing silently. His blue skin looked darker under the artificial lights. 2 to 3 weeks may be too long for some worlds. My scouts report that several colonies have less than 1 week of food reserves remaining. Mark felt the familiar weight of impossible problems. They had the cure, but time was running out faster than anyone had hoped. We need to start the distribution immediately, Mark decided. Every ship, every pilot willing to make the journey. Captain Amy Roberts had been waiting for this moment. She commanded a small fleet of human cargo vessels that had been modified for the cure distribution mission. Her brown hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and her green eyes showed the determination that had kept her flying supply runs throughout the crisis. My ships are ready, Amy said. We have 43 vessels prepared for immediate departure. Each one can carry enough cure for 3 farming worlds. That covers most of the affected colonies, Elder Corin noted. But the farthest worlds are 8 days travel time. Some of those populations may not survive long enough to see the cure take effect. Mark stared at the star charts showing the infected systems. Red dots marked worlds that were already starving. Yellow dots showed colonies that had maybe 2 weeks left. There were so many of them. There is another problem, War Chief Thane said quietly. Several worlds are too far gone. Their populations are already too weak from hunger to recover. even if the crops return. What are you saying? Mark asked. I am saying that having a cure for the blight may not be enough. Some worlds need food immediately, or their people will die before the new crops can grow. Amy looked up from her navigation charts. How much food are we talking about? Elder Corrin consulted his data tablet. 7 worlds with a combined population of 40 million beings. They need emergency supplies within 5 days or mass starvation will begin. Do we have those supplies? Mark asked. Amy shook her head slowly. Not even close. The human colonies have enough reserves to feed themselves for maybe another month. We cannot spare 40 million meals without starving our own people. The room went quiet. They had solved the impossible problem of creating a cure, only to discover another impossible problem waiting behind it. There might be a way, Amy said finally. She looked uncomfortable with what she was about to suggest. The Valdari military keeps emergency rations on their ships. The Etherians have food synthesis plants on their research stations. If we combined everything... You are talking about every species sharing their final reserves, War Chief Thane said. If the cure fails to work, we all starve together instead of separately. Yes, Amy said simply. That is exactly what I am talking about. Mark looked around the room at the alien faces. These beings had spent months preparing for the dignified death of their civilizations. Now they were being asked to risk everything on a cure that might not work. I need to contact my people, Elder Corrin said. This decision affects every Etherian in the galaxy. As do I, agreed War Chief Thane. The Valdari Council must vote on sharing our military reserves. 2 hours later, the answers began coming in. First from the Etherian Collective, the Council has voted unanimously to share our emergency supplies. We will live together or die together. Then from the Valdari High Command, all military rations are hereby donated to the emergency relief effort. There is honor in this sacrifice. Similar messages arrived from a dozen other species. Races that Mark had never heard of before were offering their last food supplies to help save strangers on distant worlds. I do not understand, Mark said to Elder Corrin. Yesterday, your people were preparing for extinction. Today, you are risking everything to help others survive. Elder Corrin's silver eyes showed something that might have been amusement. Humans have taught us something, Dr. Taylor. When faced with the choice between hope and despair, hope is harder but more interesting. The distribution fleet launched 12 hours later. Human cargo ships flew alongside Valdari warships and Etherian science vessels. Each ship carried both the cure and emergency food supplies. It was the largest cooperative effort in galactic history. Amy Roberts commanded the lead ship, heading for the furthest colony in the affected region. Her cargo hold was filled with cure vials and enough synthetic food to keep 1 million people alive for 2 weeks. This is insane, her co-pilot Lieutenant Dan Wilson said as they jumped to hyperspace. We are giving away our last reserves based on a cure we have never tested. Yes, Amy agreed. But it is the right kind of insane. The journey took 6 days. When they arrived at the colony world of Haven's End, Amy saw the desperation immediately. The orbital stations were dark to conserve power. The surface cities showed only minimal life signs. Haven's End Control, this is the cargo ship Deliverance, Amy transmitted. We are carrying emergency supplies and medical treatment. The reply came back weak and scratchy. Deliverance, this is Haven's End. We have been waiting to die for 3 days. Please tell me you have food. We have food and something better, Amy said. We have hope. The unloading took 18 hours. Amy watched as desperate colonists received their first real meals in weeks. Children who had been too weak to play began running around the cargo bays. Adults who had looked like walking skeletons began to stand straighter. But the real test came when they deployed the cure. Amy and her team spread the blue liquid across the dead farming zones while the colonists watched nervously. How long before we know if it works? Asked Colony Administrator Robert Chen. The scientists said 2 to 3 weeks, Amy replied. But I have seen humans work miracles before. Maybe it will be faster. It was faster. 5 days after treatment, tiny green shoots began appearing in the dead fields. By the end of the first week, healthy crops covered the landscape like a green blanket. Similar reports came in from colonies across the galaxy. The cure worked better than anyone had hoped. The original Earth genetics were not just resistant to the blight, they were immune to it. Amy, came Jake Morrison's voice over the interstellar radio. You need to see the latest reports from the other worlds. Amy activated her communication screen to see dozens of messages from grateful colonies. Etherian farming worlds showing golden harvests. Valdari agricultural centers with crops growing faster than ever before. Species that had never cooperated before were now sharing farming techniques and genetic improvements. The cure did not just stop the blight, Jake continued. It made everything grow better. The original Earth genetics are improving crop yields. Across the galaxy, Amy looked out at the green fields of Haven's End. Children played between rows of healthy plants while their parents worked the soil with smiles on their faces. Jake, Amy said into the radio, I think we just saved more than lives. I think we saved the future. The galaxy that had been preparing for extinction was now planning for abundance. All because humans had been too stubborn to accept that death was inevitable. Sometimes, Amy thought, being stubborn was the most important thing in the universe. 6 months after the last blight organism died in the soil of a distant farming world, Jake Morrison stood before the first Galactic Council of the post-crisis era. The great assembly hall on the neutral station of Harmony Point had never seen anything like this gathering. Representatives from 47 species filled the curved rows of seats. Valdari warriors sat next to Etherian scholars. Races that had been enemies for centuries now worked together on joint committees. At the center of it all, humanity held the position of honor as the species that had refused to let the galaxy die. The emergency protocols are now complete, announced Elder Corrin from his position as council moderator. His silver robes caught the light from the great windows that showed the stars beyond. Never again will any species face extinction alone. Jake looked around the assembly hall with wonder. 3 months ago, these same beings had been preparing for the end of their civilizations. Now they were planning joint research projects and shared defense systems. The Human Emergency Response Initiative will be the foundation of our new cooperation, Elder Corrin continued. When crisis comes to any world, the full resources of the galaxy will respond. War Chief Thane rose from his seat in the Valdari section. His blue skin showed the ritual scars of his victories, but his voice carried a new respect that had not been there before the crisis. I speak for the Valdari High Command, Thane said in his deep voice. We have learned that there is honor not just in fighting enemies, but in fighting despair itself. Humans have shown us that surrender is not always the wise choice. Applause filled the hall. Jake felt a strange mixture of pride and embarrassment. Humans had not set out to teach the galaxy anything. They had simply refused to give up. There is more to discuss, Elder Corrin said as the applause faded. The crop improvements from Earth's original genetics have exceeded all projections. Food production across the galaxy is now 30% higher than before the crisis. Dr. Mark Taylor stood from the human delegation section. His tired face showed the effects of months of constant work, but his eyes were bright with accomplishment. The Earth Genetics Project has applications beyond agriculture, Mark reported. We are finding improvements in medicine, manufacturing, even space travel. It seems our homeworld had more gifts to give than we ever imagined. Which brings us to a proposal, Elder Corrin said. The Council has voted to establish a new classification for Earth. No longer will it be forbidden territory. Instead, Earth will become a protected research world, available for careful study by all species. Jake felt his throat tighten with emotion. Earth, humanity's poisoned birth world, would become a place of hope again. Scientists from across the galaxy would work together to unlock its secrets and heal its ancient wounds. The first joint expedition will launch next month, Elder Corrin continued, led by humans but including researchers from every member species. Their mission will be to begin the long process of restoring Earth's ecosystem. Captain Amy Roberts stood up from her seat near the back of the assembly. Her simple uniform contrasted with the ornate robes and armor worn by other delegates, but her voice carried clearly through the hall. Council members, Amy said, I want to share something that happened yesterday at the Haven's End colony. Jake remembered Haven's End. It had been one of the world's closest to starvation when the crisis began. The children there asked me to deliver a message to this assembly, Amy continued. They wanted to thank everyone who helped save their world. But more than that, they wanted to promise something in return. Amy paused and looked around the hall at the alien faces watching her. They promised that when they grow up, they will never forget what it means to refuse surrender. They said they will carry the lesson of hope to whatever challenges the future brings. The hall went completely silent. Jake realized that this was the real victory. Not just saving lives, but teaching the galaxy that some things were worth fighting for, no matter what the odds. Elder Corrin rose from his moderator's position. The Council recognizes that this crisis has changed us all. We have learned that cooperation is stronger than isolation, that hope is more powerful than despair, that sometimes the impossible is simply something that has not been tried yet. More applause, but quieter this time, thoughtful rather than celebratory. But most importantly, Elder Corrin continued, we have learned that in the darkest hour, someone must be stubborn enough to light a candle rather than curse the darkness. Humanity has been that light for all of us. As the formal session ended, delegates began gathering in small groups to discuss implementation of the new protocols. Jake found himself surrounded by alien beings who wanted to shake his hand and express their gratitude. Administrator Morrison, came a voice behind him. Jake turned to see a young Etherian female with the silver eyes of her species. I am Scholar Lena, assigned to the Earth Restoration Project. Scholar Lena, Jake replied with a slight bow, still getting used to Etherian customs. I wanted to ask you something personal if I may, Lena said. When your species was facing extinction, what made you so certain that fighting was better than accepting fate? Jake thought about the question. He remembered standing in the dead wheat fields of New Eden, looking at the ashes of humanity's future. He remembered the moment when he decided to fight rather than surrender. We were not certain, Jake said finally. We were scared and desperate and running out of time. But we had children depending on us, and we could not look them in the eye and tell them we had given up. So it was duty that motivated you? No, Jake said. It was love. Love for the people we were trying to save. Love for the future we wanted to give them. Love for the idea that tomorrow might be better than today if someone is willing to work for it. Scholar Lena nodded slowly. Love, she repeated. Not duty or honor or logic, love. Love, Jake confirmed. And stubbornness. Do not forget the stubbornness, Lena laughed, a sound like crystal bells. I think those two things may be more connected than we realized. As the day ended and delegates prepared to return to their home worlds, Jake stood at one of the great windows looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there, Earth waited for the healing touch of united civilizations. Somewhere out there, children played in fields that had been barren wasteland just months before. Quite a view, said a familiar voice. Jake turned to see Dr. Mark Taylor approaching with a cup of coffee. Mark, Jake said, I keep expecting to wake up and find out this was all a dream. I know what you mean. 6 months ago, we were preparing to watch our species starve. Now we are planning to restore our homeworld with help from aliens who had given up hope. They stood in comfortable silence, looking out at the galaxy they had helped save. Do you think it will last? Jake asked. This cooperation, this unity. Or will everyone go back to their old ways once the crisis is forgotten? Mark sipped his coffee thoughtfully. I think we changed something fundamental, not just in ourselves but in how the galaxy sees itself. Before the crisis, each species thought they had to face problems alone. Now they know that together we can solve things that seemed impossible. And if another crisis comes, then we will face it the same way we faced this one. Together stubbornly and with the absolute refusal to accept that death is inevitable. Jake smiled. You sound like a human. I am a human, Mark replied. And for the first time in months I am proud of what that means. Outside the window the stars shone with quiet light. Each one represented solar systems where beings had learned to hope again. Each one carried worlds where children would grow up believing that tomorrow could be better than today. The galaxy had been saved not by superior technology or ancient wisdom, but by simple human stubbornness. By the refusal to accept that some problems were too big to solve. By the understanding that when death comes calling, the proper response is not acceptance but defiance. In the end, that might be humanity's greatest gift to the cosmos. Not their science or their courage, but their unshakable belief that giving up is never the answer. The stubborn light that humans carried would burn across the galaxy for generations to come, reminding everyone that hope is always worth fighting for, even when the odds are impossible, even when everyone else has given up, even when death itself looms through hunger, because humans refuse to let it win.